Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Ask the Glue Doctor, the podcast that talks about all things adhesive from the adhesive expert, Ellsworth Adhesives. On behalf of everyone here at Ellsworth Adhesives, I would like to welcome you to today's program. We've got a real good one. I'm your host, Lance Brown. We're going to be talking about hot melt adhesive technology for the packaging industry. And our guest today is Bruce Church. Bruce is the Director of Sales and Marketing at The Glue Factory. Before we get today's program underway, I just wanted to take a moment to thank all of our listeners. I was over on iTunes just this morning and I was looking at our subscriptions. We have gone over 1,200 listeners subscribing to this podcast for 2008. So on behalf of all of us here at Ellsworth, thank you for helping us make this podcast such a great success. All right, let's get this program underway. We have Bruce Church waiting to talk to us. Again, we're going to be talking about hot melt adhesive technology for the packaging industry. So Bruce, welcome. Let's start questions here. The rigid packaging industry is one of the largest industries for adhesive usage in the world. What changes, if any, has this industry seen in recent years?
Well, let's look at a rigid package in its very simplest form. We're really talking about a box. And in the past, the primary use of this box was to transport goods from one location to another, and no one really cared what that box looked like. But today's packages often serve what I'll call a dual function. Yes, they're still used to transport items from one location to another, but today, those boxes or packages are often used to display items on the store shelves. And this means those packages must be attractive. Marketers are desperately trying to get the buyer's attention by changing the look of those packages without compromising the package's integrity. So today it's very common to see things like heavy inks and varnishes and shiny coatings used on our packages. Staples and tapes are being removed from the package to give it a more appealing look. Let's face it, we live in a world where green products are becoming more preferred, so we have to consider recyclability of the products that we use. And many packages today are made from recycled products. From an adhesive perspective, these recycled substrates will respond differently and must be treated differently than some of the more conventional packaging materials. And finally, it seems as though everyone today is interested in maximizing their throughput. And this often equates to packaging lines running faster and faster. And this challenges both the adhesives that we use and the adhesive systems to keep pace with demand.
Well, Bruce, with all of the changes in packaging requirements, have there been any advancements in adhesive technologies that end users should be aware of to help their packaging operations run smoother?
I think hot melt adhesive technology has come a long way in just the last 10 years, and these advancements continue to be made on a regular basis. This new technology is allowing us to keep pace with this ever-changing demand in the packaging world. But a word of caution, these new technology platforms are not necessarily compatible with existing adhesive technologies, and this means precautions must be taken both at the manufacturing level and at the end user level to avoid what I'll call cross-contamination. So proper knowledge of adhesives and adhesive systems is really essential for maximizing the capabilities of each.
Well then, what do you believe is the single largest concern for adhesive manufacturers and suppliers today?
Well, in my opinion, today's raw material situation is unprecedented. And let's understand that many of the raw material feed streams for adhesives are tied directly to crude oil and or natural gas. And this makes the raw material pricing and availability very real issues for us. Crude oil, as we know, is well over $100 a barrel. Natural gas prices are on the rise. Certain raw materials are already on allocation, meaning that there's a limited supply to furnish a growing need. And the bottom line is that raw materials, energy, transportation costs are skyrocketing, and they're having a direct impact on the price and the availability of adhesives. You know, I wish I had better news, but the forecast is really for these increases to continue at least through the end of calendar year 2008.
As an end user of adhesives, is there anything that can be done to offset these rising costs?
Thankfully there is, but we really have to look at our adhesive systems from what I'll call a total cost of ownership perspective.
Bruce, what do you mean when you refer to total cost of ownership?
When we look at the cost of operating an entire adhesive system, we'll often find that the price per pound of the adhesive is really just the tip of the iceberg. Some of the least expensive adhesives on the market today are not necessarily the least expensive to operate. So business managers really have to be evaluating the entire cost of their operating system. And so they need to look at things like cost of downtime, maintenance costs, parts costs, cost of low yield and low mileage, cost of cleanup, and certainly the cost of packages popping open once they get out in the field. According to the PMMI, which is the Packaging Machinery Manufacturers Institute, the average cost of a packaging line being down is $160 per minute. I think that's serious money. So in my opinion, if you're purchasing adhesives purely on a cost per pound basis, you're likely experiencing a higher cost of ownership than necessary.
From an adhesive perspective, can anything be done to assist in managing these costs?
Well, probably the number one cost driver in a packaging operation is char. Char is the enemy of a packaging line. It plugs nozzles and filters, and it prematurely wears out packaging equipment. And char can occur really for two reasons. One, if adhesive containers are left open to atmosphere and foreign debris enters the system. But secondly, some of these commodity-type adhesives will degrade and or burn if left at operating temperatures for extended periods. And once they char, that char plugs your dispensing equipment, leading to unscheduled downtime, increased parts and maintenance costs, limited throughput, and let's not forget, frustrated line operators. In technical terms, commodity-type adhesives are not thermally stable, meaning that they will thicken and or increase in viscosity at application temperatures. What does that mean? Well, as they thicken, greater system pressure and larger nozzle sizes are often required to dispense them. This greater pressure in these larger nozzles generally equate to more adhesive than is required being dispensed to produce an optimal bond. If a little adhesive is good, more is not necessarily better. In fact, more can be wasteful, and it certainly leads to increased costs. Finally, commodity-type adhesives have the tendency to produce what I'll call a tail when they're cut off. In other words, they don't cut off cleanly. This tailing phenomenon is a recipe for inconsistent glue bead sizes and messy equipment. And I can tell you that most operators are not happy having to clean their equipment during or after every shift. So in summary, the keys to lowering your total cost of ownership: consider advanced adhesive technology and select the proper adhesive for your applications. Work with an adhesive expert to get your equipment set at these optimal temperatures and pressure settings. Educate your operators and your maintenance personnel. And last but not least, always document your results and try to seek improvement.
Bruce, beyond cost savings, can you think of any other benefits that plant personnel might enjoy by optimizing their adhesive systems?
If we target char and remove it from the system, our maintenance personnel will be provided the option of scheduling their downtime for maintenance work rather than always having to do maintenance on the fly. And along with the reduced cleanup that we talked about earlier, operators consistently comment that these advanced adhesive technologies have reduced smoking and odor, and that really provides a safer, more worker-friendly environment.
Bruce, these days safety is a concern for everyone. So on this subject, is there anything happening in the world of hot melt packaging adhesives?
Well, really two things come to mind. First, technology is permitting the manufacture of what I'll call reduced application temperature hot melts. This means that some of today's hot melts can actually be applied at temperature ranges in, say, 275 to 290 degrees Fahrenheit. Traditional adhesives are applied in the 325 to maybe as high as 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Of course, the adhesive still has to be matched to the application, but in cases where it's acceptable, these reduced application temperature hot melts are truly safer than the higher temperature hot melts. And a side benefit is they also consume less energy. But secondly, hot melt adhesives these days are produced in forms that will allow them to be vacuum fed through automated feed systems. These automatic systems sense a low level in the hot melt tank, and they add fresh adhesive without any direct involvement from plant personnel. So this eliminates the need for hand filling of the adhesive into a hot reservoir. And most of the time when we fill by hand, we're not perfect, and so we end up dropping some of the adhesive on the floor. And this often makes for a slippery and potentially dangerous situation. So the cost of one of these automated fill systems is fairly small when you consider the benefits they provide.
Interesting stuff, Bruce. Is there anything else you want to comment on?
You know, I've always found it interesting that hot melt adhesives are purchased by weight but actually consumed volumetrically. And here's what I mean. One of the most common questions asked by adhesive users is, what's your price per pound? And that's because adhesive is traditionally sold on a per pound basis. But to be completely fair, not all hot melt adhesive technologies have the same density. For example, a typical EVA hot melt these days would have a density of 0.99 grams per cubic centimeter. Some of the more advanced technologies will have densities in the 0.95 grams per cubic centimeter range. So what does that mean? Well, if you were to put an equal weight of each of these products into a test tube, you would actually see a visual difference, meaning that the product with the lower density would show a greater volume. In practice, this means you get more mileage out of the product with the lower density. Or to put it another way, you can seal more packages with the product that has the lower density. And in my opinion, Lance, this is one of the most overlooked and untalked about phenomenons in the adhesive packaging business.
Bruce, you've really provided us with some valuable information today. Any final comments?
I think it's important to recognize that not all hot melt adhesive technologies are created equal. And even though there's been some real advancements in these hot melt technologies, adhesives, I think, are still considered to be commodities. Those of us in the adhesive business can do a better job educating consumers on these new technologies and the benefits that they offer. Let's face it, the cost of running a business these days is expensive, and it's rising. Looking at your adhesive operations from a total cost of ownership perspective is something I would encourage business managers to consider.
Well, Bruce, I think that about wraps it up. You've really provided us with a lot of valuable information today. And, of course, we appreciate you taking the time to call in and chat with us.
Thanks, Lance. Talk to you soon.
And just remember, if any of you out there still have any questions about hot melt adhesive applications, you can get in touch with Bruce via our blog at glue.blog. That's GLUEDOCBLOG at Ellsworth.com. And don't forget, if you stop over at our website at www.ellsworth.com and head on over to the Glue Doctor University page, you can also download the Glue Factory's free hot melt application guide. And don't forget, if you have any adhesive application questions that you need answered right away, come on over to www.ellsworth.com and chat live with the Glue Doctor, Monday through Friday during regular business hours. Well, that's it for the program today. We'd like to thank you all for taking the time to download our podcast. We know there are a million ways out there on the web for you to spend your time, so we always appreciate it when you take the time to download this podcast. From all of us here at Ellsworth, I'm Lance Brown, wishing you a great day. Take care. We'll talk to you soon.